I'm going to jump in with another question because you talked about the throne of God. I would really like to talk about Psalm 110, verse 1. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool.
These two have been priming for this for a while.
Okay,
So
let's talk about that one. I love that text.
Psalm 110:1 is quoted more often than any other verse from the Old. Very important, right? Do not go away without pondering Psalm 101. Jesus used that to silence all questions.
110.
110, 110, verse 1. Jesus used that to silence all objections. Marvelous. Jesus has just discussed the Shema. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. One Lord, I repeat, one Lord. One single Lord. Kyrios is, that's clear. Echad, one single. One Lord. Then he discusses, well, who is Jesus then? Certainly not that one Lord. He's now going to talk about two Lords in Psalm 110:1. I want you to be very careful looking at the Hebrew here. It says that Yahweh, 7,000 times the name for God, Adonai, the personal name of God. Yahweh, by oracle, speaks to Adoni. Adoni, I want you to look it up very carefully. Go to the rabbi. If you can't read the Hebrew, read it. Because it's been misreported in some of your commentaries as being Adonai, even in the margin, may I say, of the New American Standard updated version. It's not Adonai. It's not Yahweh speaking to Adonai. That would be God talking to God. The universe would collapse. It's Yahweh speaking to Adoni. Check Adoni 195 times. It always is a non-deity title. Yes, it's only a difference of pointing. But it's so important that Jesus used this psalm to settle all issues. God speaks to non-deity. There's one God and one Lord, Jesus, Messiah, the man Messiah Jesus. That's exactly what Paul said in 1 Timothy 2:5. One God, one exalted Adoni. That's what Sarah calls Abraham. Adoni. That's what Abigail calls David. Got it? That's the non-deity title. Adoni, Adoni, Adoni. You know Adonai, it rhymes with El Shaddai, El Shad. You know it. Adonai. That's not the word there. It is not the word, although you will find it misreported, amazing, in many commentators who cannot apparently read the Hebrew. Please check Psalm 101. Vow to yourself to check that out and resolve what it says.
James, you have a different reading of that.
Or the people translating the New American Standard actually read the Hebrew as it appears in the Qumran scrolls that existed at that time, and we recognize that the vowel pointing came hundreds of years later. I have here a section from the Isaiah scroll that has the word Adonai in it.
This way, I want to see.
You can see the Hebrew right here. Yeah, sorry, I'll show it this way too. There we go. There we go. All right. Do I get a kickback from Apple for this? What is it? But this has no vowel pointing. This would have been the Hebrew of the day when the New Testament was written. The difference between Adonai and Adoni was added hundreds of years after the New Testament was written. There is no distinction whatsoever. I can show it to you. If I can show you where Adonai is, it's right there. You cannot tell the difference between Adonai and Adoni as the Hebrew was written at that time. Now, Sir Anthony has said that this particular text should be the governing text for reading the entirety of the New Testament. You said that in your debate with Fred Sanders. The problem with that is there is nothing in the original text that differentiates between these two terms. The Greek Septuagint does not differentiate between those two terms. When you and I dialogued on a radio program in London just a few months ago, you said the Septuagint differentiated between the two. The reality is that the very same Greek language that translates Adoni translates Adonai in Psalm 35:23 and Psalm 16:2. And so both of those texts indicate there is no differentiation whatsoever. Therefore, when this comes into the New Testament from the Greek Septuagint, there is none of the distinction that you have so strongly emphasized, as far as I can tell, in every single...
Just to make it clear, you're talking 250 BC. When you talk about the Septuagint, roughly. 200 years before Christ.
No differentiation found there. Nothing in the original that differentiates between the two. All you're telling me when you're telling me that the Masoretes pointed this differently is that 500 to 900 years after Jesus, they rejected the deity of Christ. That's not a news flash. We know that at that time that they did.
Wait. Where did you get 500 to 600 years later they reject the deity?
No, the Masoretes. All he's saying is that reflects.
The Masoretes. That the pointing, as we can see right here, demonstrates that that was not a part of the text
Let me mention something on the Isaiah scroll. Now, you've mentioned several times Isaiah chapter 6, which, by the way, I believe is a vision, but not to go into that right now. But in the Kedusha, you have holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. In that scroll, it only has two, holy, holy. Now, this has been the basis for, all I'm saying is I find the text questionable. There's errors that are in that text.
But that has absolutely nothing to do with what I was saying. And no one argues. Are you arguing
No,
that there was
I'm
a
not.
differentiation?
I'm just saying that I have a problem with this particular text. That's all I'm saying.
Right, using the Isaiah scroll. But okay, so let's just look at a couple other issues, though. Isaiah 6, who did he see? Adonai, sitting on the throne. Okay, that's what it first says. Then he's identified as Yahweh. Yeah. John 12 tells us that was Jesus that he saw. So that's the first thing, that it was Jesus that he saw, and yet he uses Adonai there. The second thing is that the whole argument you're using, with all respect to what you're saying, even aside from what James has pointed out, the whole argument has no significance anyway. If it's written by a court poet, okay, it is a court poet speaking about David. If it is written by David, as the New Testament affirms, it is David speaking about his master, the Messiah. That's the only point being made there. He doesn't have to be arguing for deity there.
Which you both agree about.
He's simply referring to his master, the Messiah. And Jesus is saying, he's trying to explain the opposite point of what you're making, that he can't only be the son of David. If he is a created being that is a physical descendant of David, then he's not greater than David. His whole point is that he's greater than David, which is why David calls him master. He's greater because he's the pre-existent one.
But I must find out from Sir Anthony.
Yes.
Sir Anthony.
Yes, of course.
In the Septuagint, at Psalm, it's 34:23 there. Hatheasmu kai hakuriasmu. Does that sound familiar to you?
Of course.
Where do we find that in the New Testament?
You've got a couple of examples. I've got 449 occurrences of Adonai, which always in the Masoretic pointing, and I hear you are saying, I hear you say.
This is after the New Testament.
Yeah, but are you saying the Hebrew text is wrong here?
I'm saying the vowel pointing is a commentary.
But you're saying it's wrong.
I'm saying it's a commentary
Yes.
that reflects the viewpoints of the people who made
And
it.
it's wrong.
I just showed you the Isaiah scroll that does not contain it. It is a later commentary. Wrong, right isn't the issue. Does it represent what would have been taught by Jesus at that time? That's what we should be concerned about.
Yes, and I'm very concerned with that. Because in the argument in the New Testament is that Jesus is superior to the angels. If he's God, you don't need to say that. They argue in the Hebrews on the basis that Adoni is the word there, clearly. They're saying this is better than the angels. That's silly. If the word is Adonai, if it were.
Okay, we just moved to Hebrews 1, didn't we?
Yes, no, the whole New
Where he's
Testament.
explicitly called God and the one who created everything
And
in
he's
the beginning.
identified as Yahweh. But my point is, there is no differentiation in the Greek Septuagint, is there? In the Greek Septuagint, there is no way of knowing whether it was Adonai or Adoni, is there?
No, there absolutely is. You've got 449 examples of
there absolutely is or absolutely isn't?
There absolutely is.
How? How do you tell that?
You've got a couple of exceptions which for linguistic reasons occur. The two that you quoted. I've got 195 occurrences of Adoni, distinguished from Adonai 449
but
times.
how did, if...
That's what the rabbis have
the
done.
whole
Not
point
in
you're
the Greek Septuagint.
Yes, Kyrios Mu. Look at Ladoni. You won't find Ladoni as Kyrios Mu, other than Kyrios Mu. It's getting technical.
Okay.
You won't find Ladoni other than Kyrios Mu anyway.
In sum, though, the whole point you're making proves nothing, because David was simply speaking about the Messiah as his master. He didn't have to confess him as God everywhere. Not every confession.
Never did. Never imagined the Messiah was an anointed one was God.
The fact is, all the texts that we present, just to emphasize again, that pointed to pre-existence.